Hey there, Stampers. This is Sherry Roth. I'm a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Alberta, Canada, and welcome to, I believe this is episode 5 of my year-long series of card making using scraps. So today I am using leftover pieces from a package of Nature's Sweetness 12 by 12 pattern paper. So this is a Stampin' Up! Product that was initially released in the January to April mini catalog and is carrying over to the 2024-25 annual catalog as well. So I realized when I was going through my pattern paper that I only had a little bit of this pattern paper left. So I knew that that's what I wanted to focus on for this month's card making using scraps. So we're gonna see what we can create with this. Now, I did have a little bit more because I did pre-do some things just so it wouldn't take too long. So I've pre-cut some circles. You can see where the circles are missing here out of some of these patterns, but I'll talk you through exactly what I've done. But before we get into that, let me share what I've pulled out to use. So not only do I have these from scraps, I also went through my ribbon and twine scrap bin, and I have some scraps of Pebbled Path jute. I have this gold ribbon that was in there. This is long retired, but I always like to do that, pull out products that coordinate, even if they are retired, especially embellishments, because anything that coordinates, that scraps, I'd love to use up. And then I've also pulled out this gold trim as well, which is retiring. It comes in a package of gold and silver. And then as far as embellishments, I pulled out 2 different embellishments. So I pulled out these Cork Rounds, which are part of this collection. And then I also noticed that I only have 4 or 5 of these brushed metallic adhesive back dots. So my goal in this video is to use every last one of these. All right, and then as far as product goes, let's slide this over. I pulled out the Distressed Tile 3D embossing folder, which I find really goes well with this pattern paper, and the Magnolia Mood bundle, which is a bundle that you can find in the online exclusive section of the website. Now, I know that a couple days ago, this was on low inventory. I'm not sure if it's still available or not. But I will have all of the supplies that I use linked below. If anything is sold out or not available, I will be sure to mark that, okay? And then I'm going to use something that is soon to be released. So on May 1st, when the next annual catalog comes out, these dies are going to be released. You can get the dies alone, or you can get them with a stamp set as a bundle. They're called Spotlight on Nature, and I love these dies because there's a variety of sizes of circles, and then each size kind of has different patterns on them. So we're going to use those today as well. And then, of course, I've pulled out some coordinating cardstock. I've got mostly white card bases. I did pull out 1 Pebbled Path card base, and I've got the stuff that I need to emboss, because I think I'm going to emboss most of my greetings. And I think that's it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll probably speed this up and then talk you through it. Okay, so we're going to start with this largest piece of pattern paper. I'm going to trim it down to 5 inches by 3 3/4. So I'll have 2 pieces that measure the same. So when I do things like this, if I can, I will try to make 2 of each card, because the design process takes the longest. So it makes sense to just duplicate. So I've roughened around the edges using my paper snips, and I'm going to bring in a Pebbled Path card base. And then I realized that I started with the wrong bit. So you're going to see me set these pieces aside. I will come back to them. But I decided to go with the one where I die cut a bunch of circles. So I'm picking a few different sized circles and some patterned paper that I'm going to die cut. So I grabbed a few, and then I'm going to take them over, die cut them, and bring them back. So I used 4 different sized circles for this. And you can see I cut 4 of them from, actually maybe I did have 4 different sizes, but 2 of one size. And one of them is cut from cardstock, so I used a little bit of pecan. So I went around that white piece. It is embossed using that fabulous embossing folder that I shared. And now I'm just adding a little bit of splatter using my Wink of Stella. So if you squeeze your Wink of Stella a little bit and then tap it with your bone folder, you get this beautiful splatter like you saw there. So this piece, you can find all the measurements for these in the blog post that I link in the description below. I'm not going to go through and give you the measurements here. All right, so I'm going to emboss my greeting. So I just took my embossing buddy and ran that across the white. That just kind of removes any oils from my fingers or any static that's in the cardstock. And I stamped my greeting twice. So I'm using the Happy Birthday greeting from the Magnolia Mood bundle. And I'm sprinkling it with some gold embossing powder because there are gold elements in this pattern paper. Tapping off the excess, and then I'll bring in my heat tool and heat it up. And then I fussy cut it. So I fussy cut each one of them. Now if you are not a fan of fussy cutting, you can leave them as a strip. I just love the detail of a fussy cut greeting. And we do have a couple greeting sets where you do get fussy cut, or sorry, you do get dies so that it appears that you fussy cut the greeting. All right, so I'm just going to stick that to a piece of thick white cardstock, and then I'm going to adhere my circles. I'm starting with the largest circle. They're all going to get adhered flat, and I'm actually only going to use 4 of the 5 circles that I die cut for this particular card. So I'm adding those 2 patterns with the gold. Then I'm adding the, let's see. Oh, actually, I guess 3 of them have the gold accents, and then the small pecan pie circle. I've got my greeting there, and I'm going to audition a few different ribbons to see what works. I tried the Pebbled Path jute, and I didn't love it. It felt just a little bit too rustic for this particular card with this much gold on it. So I end up using the gold twine that I have there. So I'm just going to adhere a mini glue dot, adhere the twine, and then I'm going to snip some dimensionals and add them to the back of my greeting so that my greeting can pop up over top of that, the knot of the twine. Then I'll bring in some of those embellishments that I want to finish up, and I'm going to use all 5 of those on this one card. And then you'll see that I pull in, I finished it, so I was pretty excited about that. I bring in a second card, which is made, use the same way. I'm pretty sure I use it. I bring it in. Oh, actually, I'm trying to figure out what to do on the inside here. Okay, so I'm having a look at different patterns where I can use some scraps where it will carry that pattern on the inside, into the inside of the card. And I realized I have a strip here that is, I believe it was long enough. So it was like, I think I cut it at 4 1/4, and then I'm just cutting some strips. So I'm going to use 2 of those strips, and you'll see I'll use one on the inside of this card, and then I pull in a second card that I had made off camera, and I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of that one. All right, so here's the second one. The only difference with this one is I had a scrap of that gold twine. So I used that, and I had a white baker's twine bow sitting on my desk. So I added that over top of the gold twine. And you'll be able to see those in the pictures over in the blog post that corresponds with this video. The other thing that I did differently on that card is I added Cork Rounds because I didn't have any more of those metallic embellishments that I used on the first card. Okay, so here we're pulling back those 2 pieces that I cut at the beginning of the video. We're going to add them to a thick white card base, not a Pebbled Path card base. So I'm looking through my scraps because what I'm looking for is, that's a lot of white on that because the patterned paper is white with some gold grid. So I wanted something with a bit more pattern, something to kind of anchor the where my greeting will go or my focal point will go. So I found that this pattern paper, it's quite nice. It's a little busy, but it's quite nice. It's just what it needs. So I trimmed it to 3 3/4 wide, and then I had some gold there. So I'm going to add that behind so that we have a little touch of gold. And then I've die cut some circles from some pecan pie cardstock. And that is where I'm going to anchor that's the placeholder for my focal point. So I took one of the images from the Magnolia Mood stamp set and I stamped it with Versamark and embossed it with gold embossing powder. And then I'm pulling in some greetings. I had some happy birthday embossed with gold greetings cut, but I felt like it was just a bit too much gold. So I pulled in my pecan pie cardstock and some scraps of white, and I'm going to stamp that same happy birthday greeting with pecan pie. And then I will fussy cut them again. Again, if you are not a fan of fussy cutting, these can be cut into just a rectangle and used that way. All right, so I'm trying it out. I'm just seeing what it looks like as a rectangle, but I really wanted that fussy cut look. So I went ahead and fussy cut those. So now I'm going to go ahead and assemble my card. So I'm going to start with by trimming off the bottom of my circle, and then I'm going to layer my cardstock or my pattern papers. So you can just see a little bit, maybe about 1/8 of an inch of that gold, and then add that towards the bottom of my larger piece of pattern paper. Then I'll add my circle kind of tucked underneath there. And then that gets added. Oh, I'm just going to distress the edges there where the pattern paper kind of overlapped. Add a little bit of adhesive and stick that on the front of the card. So I get often asked what kind of adhesive I use. I use Tombow multipurpose glue available through Stampin' Up, but I have it in a bottle that I purchased on Amazon, and I will link that bottle in the description below. So here I'm trying out that gold ribbon that I have pulled out from my scraps. I didn't love it, so I'm going to use a little bit of the Pebbled Path jute for a little bit of extra texture to the card. So popping part of that little magnolia bud up, and then the other part is flat. I'm just going to add a little dimensional and add my bow, and then cut some dimensionals and pop my greeting up. And then I'll finish it off with 3 cork rounds. So I will link in the description to where you can find the other videos in this year-long series that I'm doing on using scraps for card making. Okay, so the second card here is assembled. Like I said, I like to make 2 cards if I can, if I have enough supplies. But now I'm looking through my scraps to figure out what I can use for the inside, because decorating the inside of your card is a great way to use up all those little bits and pieces that you have left over. So I'm just trimming these down, one so it's not quite as wide and the other one so it's not quite as long. And that is the same kind of grid pattern that is on the outside of the card. So I cut it down to 4 inches. And then remember the bottom of the circle that I trimmed off? I'm adding that on the inside as well. So I never throw anything away until I'm finished a crafty session, because you never know when something like a little scrap that is not meant for anything else could come in handy to decorate the inside or as a little tuck in here and there. All right, and I had this extra circle cut from the first card that I shared. So I'm just going to add that on the inside of this one. I only had one of them. So I just added it to the inside of the one card. And there is card number 2. All right, now we're working on to card number 3. So I'm pulling back my scraps, the larger pieces that I have left, to see what I have to work with. All those bits and pieces on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm going to end up tossing those because they're just tiny little things. And so I picked the largest piece, which is this Pebbled Path piece of cardstock or pattern paper with some gold script, and I'm measuring it to find out how big it is. So I'm going to cut it down the middle first. I believe it was 2 3/4 by 9 inches. And then I'm going to rotate it and cut those pieces in half. So I have 4 pieces that measure, I think it was about 1 5/8 by 4.5. I had a look at the back to see if I might want to alternate some of the strips, but I didn't like the brown with the gray. So I'm just going to use 3 of those strips on here, and just kind of put them at a, askew, not perfectly aligned. I am going to distress around the edges. I do this often. I love the look of it. So I'm bringing in my seal adhesive for this because I might want to reposition. And I find I have a little bit more flexibility with the seal than I do with the Tombow. So I'm going to add the 2 pieces on the side first, and then the piece down the middle. So they're kind of in a V shape, and then the middle piece is just going to go right down the center. All right. So now I think I'm going to use this gold ribbon that I haven't had the opportunity to use. And I had that happy birthday that was fussy cut, but it felt like it needed something to ground the greeting down. So I pulled out a circle. I'm looking at my pattern paper scraps, and I felt like it would be too busy if I used pattern paper. So I went to my scraps and pulled out a piece of vellum, which unfortunately we don't carry vellum anymore. But I will continue to use because I love vellum, and it's often just what you need to add to a card. So I will see if I can find another source for it and link it in the description below. So I'm just adding a little bit of seal, added my gold twine, and then I'm separating some of the pebbled path jute and tying a bow. So I find the jute is just a little bit thick for a card, so I do like to separate the fibers to make it a little bit thinner. So I tied a bow. I'm going to add that on there, and then add some dimensionals, and then put that over top. And I realized I didn't add any dimension or any embellishments to this one, but that's okay. So I like to decorate the vellum before adding the vellum to the card so that I know exactly where I can put adhesive, so you don't see that adhesive from underneath. Okay, so now I'm going to decorate the inside. So I've got a white layer, and that 4th strip that I had of the pebbled path pattern paper, I'm just flagging the end. And then I'm going to add that across the top, or not across the top, but at the top, and trim off the excess. And then I'm looking through my scraps. I found this scrap here. I'm going to trim that down to, I think it's about a 3/4 of an inch. I'll flag the end of that and then add that over top as well. And then I've decorated the inside of the card, and that will get attached. And then you'll notice that I realize I have this little dish off to the side where I put all my scraps, and I had found a pebbled path leaf that I pulled out thinking that I could use it on one of the cards. So you'll see me pull that in and tuck that in underneath here in a moment. Yeah, so I just happened to notice that, and I feel like it's a great little addition in there. So I'm just going to add a little bit of liquid glue to the back and tuck it underneath my fibers, and it's done. So let's take a look. We've got card number 3, and then there's card number 2, and there's card number 1. So 5 cards from that little pile of scraps, and this is what I have left. All right, thanks so much for watching. If you are not yet a subscriber, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks for watching.